Hello guys and welcome again to my channel. So it's been a long time since I last have a taping for accounting lectures. So I'm back. So we're going to talk about ABC, but that is not the alphabet. It's the activity-based costing. But let me first tell you that if you don't want, if you cannot understand what I'm talking about, uh, I have problems in pronunciation, you can click on the subtitles, the CC on your YouTube app. And if you find me slow when talking, you can select also in the settings times 1, times 1.5, times 2, something like that. So let's have a quick lesson, the activity-based costing. I cannot sleep, that which is why I have to tape this. So activity-based costing, before we go to the particular topic. Let's say, for example, you have two products, product A, product B. And this product A and product B has a direct material of 100,000. And this product B has a direct material of 150,000, direct material cost. So again, direct materials are those materials that are directly traceable to the product. Like for example, if we're talking about a chair, a wooden chair, the wood that is found on the chair is part of the direct materials, as well as if ever you're using nails, the nails is the cost of those nails is also a direct material cost. Okay, and of course the direct materials, if that is there, sometimes, most of the times, you have direct labor also, because such labor is necessary to convert these direct materials into a finished product. Again, this is considered as direct because those are the labor costs that were applied to the product. Before we continue, I guess the light is dim, but the most important thing is not my face. The most important thing is what is written in this board, so focus on that. Okay, so direct labor, for example, for product A is 200,000 and the other one is 100,000, something like that. Of course, there is a third component when we talk about manufacturing entities. So we're going to talk about manufacturing entities, by the way. So we have another cost, which is the factory overhead. So the factory overhead is usually composed of indirect materials and indirect labor. So when we talk about indirect materials, those are materials that are necessary for the production, but they are not directly traceable to the finished product. And it is also composed of indirect labor. So in the factory overhead, we have indirect materials, indirect labor, or those labor costs that you have paid for, but it's not directly traceable to your finished product. Okay? So some examples of factory overhead, indirect labor are um, salaries of the janitor of a manufacturing plant, something like that. So maintenance of the manufacturing plant is necessary for production, right? But it is not directly applied. The janitorial services is not directly applied to your chairs, for example, if you are manufacturing chairs. So those salaries of those who really make the chairs, those costs are direct labor. So that's the distinction between direct labor and indirect labor. Okay? And normally, this factory overhead, it's difficult to get the actual cost of this because there are a lot of sources of factory overhead. It could be electricity, it could be oil in the equipment. So it's very difficult to get the actual factory overhead. So normally this is applied. For example, factory overhead is applied at 120% of direct labor. Normally, it is patterned on the direct labor. So what does it mean? So 200,000 times 1.20, that is the factory overhead as if of product A. So 100% is 200, 10% is 20. So 120% is 240,000, right? And the other one, this 100,000 times 120%, you are gonna get 120,000. So overall, the cost of your product A, 100 plus 200 plus 240, um, 300, 540. And the other one is 150 plus 100, 250, 350, 370. So where does this enter into the picture? So activity-based costing states that if you are applying factory overhead like this, the basis is the direct labor, you are prone to sub-optimization. So what is sub-optimization? Sub-optimization is when you you put so much cost with a certain product. Like for example, this one, 240,000. So the cost is 540,000. So sub-optimization happens if this product A is not really deserving of the 240,000. Maybe the real factory overhead that should be assigned to product A should only be 140,000, for example. So what will happen? The cost here might be big and the cost here will be smaller. So that's sub-optimization, where one product is suffering and the other one enjoys. That's sub-optimization. So what is the effect of sub-optimization? Sub-optimization, if the cost here is greater than what should be, then the price of this will become higher. And if we are in competition with other businesses, you will lower your profits. It's because you have a higher price. Because cost plus markup, it will become higher if the cost is bigger. How about the others? Maybe you will be deceived if ever A does not deserve to have 240, like for example, 140 lang dapat. This one should be 220. What will happen is, this will suffer, this will not. And the bad effect of having B, you will not be happy about this actually. Why? It's because you will think that if you sell it, you will have a profit because you have a lower cost. But actually, you are losing. Okay? This one, of course, the cost is too much, the price is too much, no one will buy. That's the negative effect of sub-optimization. And this one, you will think that you are already profiting or earning a profit, profiting. You're already earning a profit, when in fact, you're not. Okay? So that's sub-optimization. So again, where does this topic enter in the picture? On the activity-based costing, you have to analyze the factory overhead. Like in this case, you have 360,000. 240 plus 120, that's the factory overhead. So what you will do is you have to divide this in what do we call as cost pools. Cost pools. So for example, there are only two cost pools for simplicity of discussion. So the cost pools are rent, which is, let's put an amount on the rent. So if it is 360, let's say for example, the rent is 250,000. And the electricity is as if 110. 110,000, totaling to 360. So, on those cost pools, you have to know the cost drivers. The cost drivers are the measurements that will dictate the consumption of this cost. Like for example, when we talk about electricity, we're talking about kilowatt hours, right? So the higher the kilowatt hours, the higher your share should be on the electricity, right? And if we're talking about rent, of course, we're talking about square meters. So for example, you analyze these cost pools and the cost drivers. you have to know how many square meters are occupied by the equipments of product A, and how many square meters do the equipment of product B occupies. Like for example, um, A and B half, they are occupying half of the space. So that means if this is 400 square meters, 200 square meters is occupied by A, and 200 square meters is occupied by B. Okay? So supposedly, logically speaking, the rent of 250,000 should be divided equally by both product A and product B. Okay? But later, let's talk about the electricity. Like for example, in production of product A and production of product B, how many kilowatts are used? Like for example, this 110,000 is 2,000 kilowatts. 2,000 kilowatts. And the overall 2,000 kilowatts, A used um, A used, for example, what 1,500 kilowatts. A used 500 kilowatts only. So what will happen? You have to divide this based on the cost drivers. Okay? So if we're talking about rent, A should have 125,000. 125,000. Because on the 250, both of them occupies the same amount of square meters in space. Okay? How about the other one? So, if 110,000 is 2,000 kilowatts, so that means per kilowatt is, I guess, so 1,000, if this is divided by 1,000, 110 pesos per kilowatt if 1,000. So, we have 55 per kilowatt. So, let me have my calculator. And if I'm wrong, of course, at least you know already the process because I cannot really use mentally. I'm used to having some calculator. So if this is 55 per kilowatt, so 55 times 500 kilowatts, the kilowatts used by product A, and you will have 27,500. I don't think this is right, but because is this one for, let's try. So if we're talking about B, we have 55 times 1,500. We have 82,500. So this should be 110,000. 27,500 plus 82,500, 110. And this is 250. So the total cost of A and B, you have 125,000 for A plus 27,500. It's 152,500. So letter B, product B, 125,000 plus 82,500. And you'll have 207,500. So that is activity-based costing, whereby you have to divide the costs using their cost drivers. Again, the total cost, you have to group them into different cost pools. You have to analyze what are the cost drivers, and you have to divide the cost based on the cost drivers. So as you can see, they are very much different. So here, if we're talking about the usual application of factory overhead, 240 is for A, when it should have been 150 to 500. And B has only 120,000 when it should have been 207,500. That is a very good example of sub-optimization. And that is a very good example why activity-based costing is necessary. Okay? So, that's it for this video. So, If you learn, please click like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell and wait for my other uploads. Thank you.